Picture this. A woman in 1923 Germany wheelbarrows cash to the bakery. By the time she reaches the counter, the price of bread has doubled. She can't afford a loaf, but she can afford something else: firewood. So she burns the banknotes to heat her home. A century later, in Venezuela, stacks of Bolivar bills lie in trash cans. They're cheaper than napkins. In Zimbabwe, a single note once claimed to be worth $100 trillion and couldn't buy a bus ticket. When money dies, life doesn't stop. People still eat, trade, marry, work, and dream. So if money can vanish overnight, what actually survives? This is the Economic Archivist, where we dig through the ruins of past economies to see what's left standing. Because every currency collapse leaves clues for the next one. Money fails in different ways. Sometimes it rots through inflation, eaten from the inside by too many new units chasing too few real goods. Sometimes it shatters in a crisis when banks close, ATMs go dark, or governments suddenly declare certain notes worthless. Sometimes it simply fades, replaced by something more trusted: foreign currency, commodities, or raw power. But underneath all these stories, the same three questions always appear. Who loses everything? Who walks away richer? And what keeps working when the numbers don't? To answer that, let's walk through the archive. After World War II, in the ruins of Germany, cigarettes became currency. They were small, divisible, and always in demand. You could pay your barber in Lucky Strikes, your landlord in Chesterfields. Even non-smokers hoarded them. Why cigarettes? Because they were scarce, useful, and widely recognized. They solved three problems money is supposed to solve: trust, transport, and time. In Argentina's 2001 crisis, bank deposits were frozen. The peso collapsed. People couldn't access their savings, but trade didn't stop. Neighborhoods created local currencies. Farmers bartered food directly. Those with US dollars under their mattresses suddenly held lifeboats in a sinking ship. In the Soviet Union's final years, the ruble was plentiful but meaningless. Store shelves were empty. What mattered wasn't money, but connections. A cousin who worked at a distribution center, a friend who could get medicine, a black market contact with access to Western jeans or coffee. Again and again, when money fails, three types of assets rise to the surface. Things you can use: food, fuel, tools, medicine, land. Things others already trust: foreign currencies, gold, cigarettes, even phone credits. And people you can rely on: skills, communities, and networks. Everything else turns out to be numbers written on sand. Consider Rome. For centuries, Roman silver coins were the hard currency of the Mediterranean, but as emperors stretched the military and the budget, they quietly diluted the silver content. To pay more soldiers with the same metal, they added base metals to each coin. Prices rose. Confidence fell. Eventually, a denarius that once held nearly pure silver became little more than a bronze disc with a silver wash. Rome's monetary system didn't collapse in a single day. It eroded generation by generation, mirroring the empire itself. What survived? Land, grain, military force, local loyalties. The empire faded, the farmland stayed. Or take Yugoslavia in the 1990s. Hyperinflation reached into the trillions of percent. Prices doubled every few days. Workers were paid twice a day and rushed to shops before money melted. But there was one group that floated above the chaos: those linked to hard currency. Those with German marks, US dollars, or access to exported goods. While salaries in dinars evaporated, hard currency earners bought real assets on the cheap: apartments, businesses, equipment. When stability returned, They owned far more of the country than before. Crisis didn't destroy wealth, it rearranged it. That's the uncomfortable pattern. When money fails, it doesn't flatten society, it sorts it. Savers in the local currency are quietly taxed into poverty. Debtors sometimes see their burdens evaporate as inflation eats their loans. Insiders with access to scarce goods or trusted currencies can buy reality at a discount. Collapse doesn't just test balance sheets, it sorts hierarchies. But before we turn every crisis into a conspiracy, look deeper. Why do currencies break at all? They rarely die from a single bad decision. They die from a long tug-of-war between promises and reality. Governments promise pensions, roads, armies, subsidies, schools, rescues. Voters demand more now, less tax later. Businesses demand bailouts when bubbles burst. And in the short term, the easiest answer is always the same: create more money. As long as people keep believing that prices will stabilize soon, the illusion holds. The new money feels like new wealth, until it doesn't. Confidence is like oxygen in a crowded theater. No one thinks about it until there's smoke. Once enough people believe their money will buy less tomorrow, they rush to spend it today. Prices rise faster, which confirms the fear, which makes people spend faster still. Inflation turns into runaway inflation, then into a race to get rid of money entirely. At that point, what survives is whatever never depended on the currency in the first place. A farmer can still eat from his field. A plumber can still trade repairs for food. A community that trusts each other can still swap favors, skills, and goods, whether or not the official notes mean anything. This is not romanticism, it's accounting. In every collapse, the same categories show up on the real-world balance sheet: physical capital, land, machines, housing, infrastructure; human capital, skills, health, knowledge, reputation; social capital, trust, family, networks, institutions. Money is a claim on those three. When money fails, we see who actually owns or embodies them. This is why in places like Venezuela, even as the bolivar disintegrated, people still lined up for gasoline, for food, for visas. The real currency wasn't paper, it was options. The option to leave, to trade, to grow food, to get paid in something else. And it's why in every major crisis, foreign currencies flood in. During Zimbabwe's hyperinflation, people turned to South African rand, US dollars, even cell phone minutes. In Lebanon's recent collapse, dollars and gold coins resurfaced in daily trade. When the local story of money fails, people import a new story from abroad. Does that mean the safest bet is simply to hoard gold and dollars? History is less comforting. Gold saved some, doomed others. In war zones, carrying visible gold could get you robbed or worse. In communist takeovers, gold marked you as an enemy of the people. Dollars helped those who already had access to them, but countless others never did. What consistently mattered wasn't a single magic asset, it was diversity of income sources, of skills, of relationships, of stores of value. The people who cope best when money fails aren't always the richest on paper. They're the ones whose lives don't depend on any one version of the story being true. So what does this mean for us, living in a world of rising debts, experimental monetary policy, and digital currencies? It doesn't mean panic, it means clarity. It means remembering that your salary is not your skill. Your bank balance is not your resilience. Your currency is not your community. Those can be taken, frozen, inflated, or redesigned. What's left is what we rarely put on a spreadsheet. The real lesson of currency collapse isn't buy gold or move money offshore. It's build things that keep value even when the unit of account changes. Because if history teaches anything, it's that units of account always change. The Roman denarius, The German mark, the Yugoslav dinar, the Soviet ruble, the Venezuelan bolivar, each once felt as inevitable, as permanent as the currencies we use today. None of them survived untouched. So when you hear that a currency is strong or weak, or that inflation is temporary, remember the archive. Ask strong compared to what? Temporary on whose timescale? Money is a brilliant tool, but tools break. What matters is what you're building with them. If this walk through the ruins of broken currencies gave you a different way to see your own, subscribe. I'm the Economic Archivist. In this archive, every dead currency leaves behind a living lesson. I'll be here, cataloging them, so you don't have to. Learn them the hard way.